The full moon loomed high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the quiet town of Blackwood. I had always loved the peacefulness of this place, but tonight there was an unsettling feeling in the air. As I made my way from home to my friend's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I quickened my pace, my heart racing with every step. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the empty streets. I stopped in my tracks, frozen with fear. I heard stories of strange creatures lurking in the shadows of Blackwood, but I never believed them. That is, until now. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the growl grew louder and closer. I turned around, and my eyes widened in horror. Standing in front of me was a massive wolf, its fur as black as coal and its eyes glowing as fierce yellow in the moonlight. But this was no ordinary wolf. It stood on two legs, and its front paws resembling human hands, and its mouth was filled with long, sharp teeth. I stumbled backwards, trying to find strength to run. But before I could even take a step, the creature let out a blood-curdling howl, and I knew I was no match against it. I closed my eyes and braced for the worst. But instead of pain, I felt a sharp wind rush past me, and I opened my eyes. The creature was gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had just happened. Then it hit me. I had just encountered a werewolf. I hurried back home, my mind racing with fear and confusion. As I walked through the door, I nearly collapsed in relief. But as I closed the door behind me, I noticed something strange. My arms were covered in deep scratches, as if I had been in a fight. I looked closer and saw that the scratches were actually in the shape of claw marks. My heart raced as I remembered the creature's claws, and the realization slowly sank in. I had been attacked by a werewolf. But how was this possible? Werewolves were just a myth, right? I sat on my bed, my mind whirring with questions and my heart still pounding my chest. I couldn't sleep that night, every noise sending shivers down my spine. But as the sun began to rise, I finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I thought it had all been a terrifying dream. But the sight of the scratches on my arms and the memories of the creature's howl quickly reminded me that it was all too real. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that there had to be a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was not of this world. I spent the next few days trying to shake it off, this encounter, but it seemed like everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. I couldn't help but feel like I was being followed by the werewolf. I even started to notice strange behaviors of some of the townspeople, as if they were hiding something. I confided in my friend Rachel about my encounter, hoping she would have some sort of explanation. But instead, she looked at me with fear in her eyes and said, "You saw the Blackwood werewolf?" I was taken aback by her words. Rachel then proceeded to tell me the legend of a werewolf who had roamed the town for years, terrorizing its residents every full moon. The creature was said to have been cursed by a witch and would transform into a bloodthirsty werewolf every month. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was too clear to ignore. Rachel then told me the only way to break the curse was to kill the werewolf with a silver bullet. I couldn't comprehend the thought of killing another living being, even if it was a cursed one. But as the next full moon approached, I knew I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to face this creature and put an end to its terror. On the night of the full moon, I armed myself with a silver bullet and headed to the outskirts of the town, where the creature was said to roam. I waited anxiously, my heart in my throat as the moon rose higher in the sky. Suddenly, I heard a familiar growl and the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. I aimed my gun, and as the werewolf emerged from the darkness, I pulled the trigger. The silver bullet struck the creature, and it let out a howl of pain before collapsing to the ground dead. I stood there, shaking in the shock, as if I realized what I've just done. I quickly turned and fled back to safety of my house. The following day, news spread through the town of the death of the Blackwood werewolf. And as the sun set that night, the town seemed to lift the curse that had been plaguing them for years. But for me, the memory of that terrifying encounter and the weight of taking a life will never be forgotten. Every full moon, I couldn't help but wonder if the werewolf's curse had truly been broken, or if there were still more of its kind waiting to hunt down innocent victims like me. I have always been fascinated with creepy stories. The kind that gives you goosebumps and makes you question every little noise around you. And, as a writer, I'm always on the lookout for new and interesting story ideas. So, when I stumbled upon this old abandoned hospital, I knew there would be a story waiting to be told. The hospital sat at the edge of the town, hidden amongst the tall trees and overgrown bushes. Its once white walls were now covered in layers of dirt and grime. The windows were broken and the doors hanging off their hinges. The hospital had an eerie presence, as if it was trying to tell me something. I approached the entrance cautiously, my heart racing with excitement and fear. The air felt thick and heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I pushed open the creaky doors and stepped into the dimly lit lobby. The only source of light came from the small windows scattered around the room and the flickering lights above. As I ventured further into the hospital, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I could hear the faint soft sound of footsteps echoing through the corridors, but every time I turned around, there was no one there. The hospital was filled with old medical equipment, broken furniture, and peeling wallpaper. It was like stepping back in time, and I couldn't help but wonder about the people who once roamed the halls. As the sun began to set, I decided to find a place to spend the night. The thought of spending the night in a creepy hospital excited me, and I couldn't wait to experience the eerie atmosphere in the dark. I found a room with a relatively intact bed and decided to make it my base for the night. As I settled in, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on the end, and I could hear faint whispers in the air. I brushed it off as my imagination, trying to scare myself even further. But then, I heard a door slam shut, followed by footsteps running away. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and cautiously made my way towards the source of the noise. I found myself in a long hallway, lined with doors on each side. The doors were all slightly ajar, and I could see faint glimpses of empty rooms inside. I followed the sound of the footsteps, and it led me to the end of the hallway, where a single door stood open. As I approached, I could hear faint cries coming from the inside of the room. With shaky hands, I pushed open the door, and it was met with a shocking sight. The room was filled with old hospital beds, all occupied by pale, ghostly figures. They were all dressed in old-fashioned hospital gowns, their eyes void of any life but filled with terror.
"What are you doing here?"
one of them asked, his voice shaky and filled with fear. I just came here to explore, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady.
"You must leave. This place is cursed. We are trapped here, and anyone who stays here past sundown will never leave,"
another voice chimed in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. If it wasn't for the fear etched on their faces, I would have thought they were just a figment of my imagination. But their words struck with me. They were trapped in this hospital, and I was risking the same fate. I quickly made my way back to my room and packed my things. I didn't want to take my chances. As I was about to leave, I noticed a glint of light coming from under one of the beds. I crouched down and saw a small silver key lying on the ground. Without thinking, I grabbed it and made my way to the door. But as soon as I touched the doorknob, a sharp pain shot through my hand. The key seemed to burn my skin, and I dropped it with a cry. The door had shut on its own, leaving me trapped inside with the ghostly figures. My heart racing, I looked around for any way to escape, but the windows were too high, and the door wouldn't budge. I was trapped, just like the others. As the night went on, the ghostly figures became more restless, their cries and whispers growing louder. I could see them moving around the room, watching me with pleading eyes. I soon realized they were trying to warn me, to show me their fate, in hopes that I would not stay trapped with them forever. And as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The ghostly figures began to move towards me, their hands reaching out as if they were trying to grab me. I could feel their cold breath on my skin, and I knew I had to act fast. Desperately, I reached out for the key and I picked it up, ignoring the burning sensation on my skin. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it, and with a loud creak, the door swung open. I didn't waste my time and ran out of the room, ignoring the cries and screams behind me. I didn't stop until I was out of the hospital and back in my car. I drove away as fast as I could, not looking back at the abandoned building. It was only when I was miles away that I realized I still had the key in my hand. I decided to return the key next day, wanted to put an end to the cursed hospital and the ghostly figures. When I arrived, the hospital was nowhere to be found. In its place was an empty field, as if the hospital had vanished into the thin air. It has been years since the incident, but the memory of the creepy hospital still haunts me. I have never been able to forget the ghostly figures and their warning. I always wonder if anyone else had stumbled upon the hospital and experienced the same fate as me. But one thing for sure, I will never go looking for a creepy story again. Some things are better left untouched and forgotten. The night air hung heavy with an enormous stillness, as I, a weary McDonald's employee, reluctantly stepped into the dimly lit fast food restaurant for my night shift. The golden arches outside cast long shadows, creating an eerie atmosphere that clung to the empty parking lot. As the clock struck midnight, I knew I was in for a long, solitary night. My usual routine consisted of mundane tasks, flipping burgers, taking orders, and serving the occasional late-night customer. However, this particular night felt different. Behind the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The kitchen equipment hummed softly, and the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Determined to ignore my growing unease, I focused on wiping down the counters and restocking supplies. The drive-through intercom crackled to life, making me jump. "Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order?" I recited, my voice trembling slightly. There was only silence on the other end. I frowned, thinking it might be a glitch in the system. Just as I was about to speak again, a soft whisper echoed through the speaker, barely audible. "Help me." A chill ran down my spine, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I looked around, half expecting to see a prankster or a colleague playing tricks on me. The restaurant, however, remained empty. Uneasy, I dismissed it as my imagination and continued with my duties. Throughout the night, the whispers persisted. I heard faint voices mumbling in the distance, their words unintelligible. As I moved from the kitchen to the dining area, the temperature seemed to drop, and an invisible presence tugged at my clothing. I quickened my pace, glancing nervously over my shoulder. The ghostly encounters escalated when I entered the walk-in freezer to retrieve more supplies. The temperature plummeted, and my breath hung in the air like a visible specter. As I reached for a box on the high shelf, the heavy door slammed shut behind me with a resounding thud. Panic set in as I frantically pounded on the door, my breath forming mist in the icy air. The whispers grew louder, now echoing within the confined space. "Release us," they pleaded, sending their shivers down my spine. With a surge of adrenaline, I forced the freezer door open and stumbled out, gasping for breath. I hesitated, but pressed on with my duties, feeling a heavy weight on my shoulders. The once familiar hum of the kitchen equipment now sounded like a haunted melody. As the night wore on, my fear intensified. The voices became more insistent, the messages more desperate. I couldn't escape the feeling that the spirits were trying to communicate something important, something unresolved from the past. But what could I do? In the early hours of the morning, as the first days of dawn illuminated the empty restaurant, the whispers finally ceased. Exhausted and terrified, I slumped into a booth questioning my sanity. Was it all a figment of my imagination? A result of sleep deprivation? Or had I truly encountered restless spirits trapped in the confines of the McDonald's? With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone, intending to call for help or share my harrowing experience with someone. As I scrolled through my contacts, I noticed an old newspaper article about the McDonald's location. The headline sent a chill down my spine. Tragic incident claims lives at local fast food restaurant. The article detailed a fire that had engulfed the restaurant years ago, leading to the loss of several lives. The spirits I encountered were the echoes of the past, yearning for release. As the realization dawned on me, I couldn't help but wonder if I had played a part in helping those lost souls find peace. From that night forward, The McDonald's held an unspoken understanding with the supernatural. I continued my night shifts, now accompanied by a newfound awareness of the spirits that lingered. The whispers have stopped, but the lingering presence served as a haunting reminder of the otherworldly events that had unfolded in the dead of night. The once ordinary fast food joint had become a nexus between the living and the departed, forever bound by the shared experience of that fateful night. As time went on, I delved deeper into the history of the McDonald's location. I discovered that the fire had been particularly gruesome, claiming not only the lives of employees, but also customers who had been enjoying their meals. The souls of the departed, it seemed, found no peace. The restless spirits tethered to the place they once frequented. One night, as I was closing up, I felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air grew charged, and a faint glow emanated from the corners of the restaurant. The spirits had returned, but this time they didn't convey fear and desperation. Instead, I felt a sense of gratitude. A spectral figure materialized before me, a silhouette in the shape of a woman. The figure's eyes held a mix of sorrow and relief, and a soft, ethereal voice filled the air.
Thank you for hearing us. Thank you for helping us find peace.
The apparition reached out a transparent hand, and I, despite of my initial fear, extended mine. A gentle warmth enveloped me, and a flood of emotions washed over me, as it was if the spirits were expecting their gratitude through a shared connection. From that moment on, the supernatural occurrences at McDonald's became less frequent. The once restless spirits seemed to have found solace, the presence now more of a confronting one than a haunting one. I continued my shifts, not as an employee haunted by the paranormal, but as a guardian of sorts, watching over the departed souls that had finally found rest. I had always found myself drawn to creepy things in life, spending countless hours scrolling through Reddit threads and forums, searching for the next chilling tale or paragraph. So when I came across a subreddit with no members, my curiosity was immediately piqued. The subreddit was titled r/planned accidents, and clicking on it revealed a single post. It was a crime scene photograph taken from a bird's eye view, showing the gory scene with blood splattered everywhere. The caption simply read, "The first victim," followed by the date and time. I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine as I stared at the image, the eerie stillness of the room and the gruesome details captured in the paragraph leaving me unsettled. I scrolled through the rest of the subreddit, finding more posts with similar paragraphs, each one showing a different crime scene. I was amazed by the level of detail and the unsettling atmosphere captured in each image. It was like I was there, witnessing the aftermath of those horrific scenes. But as I continued to scroll, a nagging feeling of unease began to grow within me. There was something off about these photographs, something that didn't sit right with me. It took me a moment to put my finger on it, but then it hit me. There were no bodies in any of the pictures. I clicked on the first post again and studied the image more closely. The bloodstains on the floor and walls were real, that much was clear. But where were the bodies? Had they been removed before the photograph was taken? It seemed likely, considering the level of detail in the pictures and the fact that they were all taken at different dates and times. Feeling a sense of unease settling in my stomach, I decided to do some research on the dates and times listed in the post. As it turned out, each one conceited with real-life crime that had gone unsolved. I couldn't believe it. It seemed that the person who created this subreddit was actually documenting real crimes. My mind raced with questions. Who was behind this subreddit? And more importantly, why were they posting these photographs and clues on Reddit? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister and twisted at play here. With a growing sense of unease, I delved deeper into this subreddit, scouring through the posts and comments for any clues or leads. But there was nothing. No names or hints about the creator of the subreddit. It was as if the person was a ghost, haunting the forums with a disturbing content. But I couldn't let it go. I became obsessed with the subreddit, constantly refreshing the page in hopes of finding new posts. The photographs and clues became more and more intricate, leading me down a dark and twisted rabbit hole. I was so consumed by my investigation that I barely noticed the passing of time. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself neglecting my daily life and responsibilities in favor of unraveling the mystery behind the planned accident subreddit. Then one day, I stumbled upon a new post, a photograph of a dark alley with a single figure standing in the shadows. The caption read, "Next victim." My heart raced as I recognized the alley as one of my own city. Had this person been committing crimes right under my nose all this time? Determined to find out more, I reached out to the authorities with my findings. But to my horror, they brushed me off, claiming that my theories were nothing but the ramblings of a conspiracy theorist. I was frustrated and angry. How could they not see the connections? Feeling hopeless and alone, I continued to monitor the subreddit, desperate for any new developments. And that's when I saw it. A new post with familiar scene. It was another crime scene photograph, but this time there was a body. It was clear that this was the work of the person behind the subreddit, and I knew I had to act fast. After some more digging, I finally found an IP address linked to the subreddit. Without hesitation, I contacted the authorities again, providing them with crucial piece of information that would lead them to the person responsible for these heinous crimes. The next few days were a blur, as the authorities swarmed the location linked to the IP address and made an arrest. And as the details of the case were revealed, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The person behind the planned accident subreddit was a middle-aged man living a seemingly ordinary life with his wife and kids. But he had a dark secret. He was a serial killer. And the subreddit was his way of documenting his crimes and taunting the authorities. The missing bodies from the photographs were found in various locations, and it became clear that this man had been committing these crimes for years, using Reddit as his twisted outlet. I was sickened by the realization that I had been unknowingly aiding his sick game by obsessing over his subreddit. But amidst the horror and shock, there was also a sense of satisfaction. I had unknowingly stumbled upon a real-life mystery and helped bring a killer to justice. And although I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for being so involved with the case, I also couldn't help but feel a sense of pride using my passion for the strange and macabre to make the positive impact. As the subreddit was shut down and the man was convicted, I vowed to be more mindful of the content I consume online. I had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the things that fascinates us the most can also be the most dangerous. And it's important to always trust our instincts and question the things we encounter, no matter how intriguing or captivating they may seem. I had been on the road for hours, the long stretch of highway seeming to never end. I had been a trucker for years, driving alone through the endless expanse of open roads. But tonight, something felt off. but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But a sense of unease had been creeping up on me since I started my journey. The silence of night was only broken by the rumbling of my truck's engine and the occasional howling of the wind. The darkness seemed to shallow everything in its path, making the road seemed never-ending. Just as I was about to shrug off my uneasiness and continue on, my truck suddenly started to sputter and slow down. I cursed, pulling over to the side of the road. I got out and checked the engine, but everything seemed to be in working order. With a frustrated sigh, I climbed back into the driver's seat and turned the key, hoping that the problem had fixed itself. But as soon as I started the engine, I noticed a figure standing in the distance, just at the edge of the darkness. My heart started to race as I squinted, trying to make out of what or who it could be. I had driven on these roads countless times, and I had never seen anyone out here in the dead of night. Fear started to take the hold of me as a chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned off the engine and sat in silence, my eyes never leaving the figure in the distance. But to my horror, the figure started to move towards me. Without hesitation, I jumped out of the truck and ran towards the back, grabbing a tire iron for protection. The figure was getting closer and my heart was pounding in my chest. I could see now that it was a person, their features hidden in the shadows. "Who are you and what do you want?" I yelled, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure stopped in their tracks, only a few feet away from me. They remained silent, almost as if they were studying me. The air around us was thick with tension and fear. I could feel my heart racing as I stood there, the tire iron shaking in my grip. After what it felt like an eternity, the figure finally spoke. "You shouldn't have stopped." The voice was deep and raspy, sending shivers down my spine. I was about to ask them what they meant when suddenly the unknown person lunged at me. I swung the tire iron in self-defense and managed to hit him in the arm. They stumbled back and quickly recovered, throwing themselves at me once again. We grappled in the darkness, my adrenaline pumping as I tried to fight off the stranger who seemed to have been attacking me for no reason. But just as I was about to get the upper hand, I felt a sharp pain under my side and everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in a dark room, my hands and feet bound with rope. A panic set as I was looking around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The room was dimly lit, with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Just as I was about to try to break free from my restraints, the door creaked open, revealing the figure from the highway. But now, they were clad in a long cloak, their face hidden in the shadows. "Do you know why you're here?" Their voice echoed through the room. I shook my head, my heart racing. "You stopped on the wrong stretch of the highway at the wrong time. You see, this is my territory, and I don't take kindly to trespassers." The figure spoke with an unnerving calmness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This person, this stranger, had attacked me and kidnapped me for simply stopping on the side of the road. As if sensing my thoughts, they continued. "You see, I've been waiting for someone like you. Someone who's foolish enough to stop and enter my domain." I struggled against my restraints, but they were tight and showed no signs of giving. The figure watched with amusement, almost if they were enjoying my torment. "I feed on fear, you see, and you're going to be my next meal," they revealed with a sinister smile. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of this nightmare. How had I ended up in this situation? How was I going to get out of it? But as the figure came closer, ready to feed on my terror, I remembered something my late grandmother had told me when I was a child. She had always warned me to never trust strangers, but especially those who seemed to thrive on causing harm and fear. With all the strength I could muster, I let out a battle cry and lunged at the figure. Surprised by my sudden attack, they stumbled back, and I used the opportunity to break free from my restraints and run towards the door. I didn't look back as I ran through the darkness, my heart pounding in my ears. Finally, I saw the exit and burst out into the night air, grasping for air. I did not stop running until I was back in my truck, and even then, I drove as fast as I could away from the stretch of the highway. Years later, I still think about the night and wonder who or what the figure was, and if they were still out there, waiting for their next victim. I never stop on the side of the road now, always reminding myself of the horrors that could be lurking in the darkness. Because sometimes, the scariest things are not the things we can see, but the things that hide in the shadows. It was just another normal Friday night, and I was sitting in my room, minding my own business, when I decided to check my Snapchat. I had just finished watching a horror movie with my friends, so I was in the mood for something creepy. So I scrolled through my friends list, and I noticed that my crush Emily was online. I sent her a quick message, asking her if she wanted to add me on a secret Snapchat group that me and some of my other friends had created. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. I added her to the group, and within minutes, the other girls in the group started to send her snaps of themselves doing silly dances and making faces. It was all harmless fun, until I received a strange snap from one of the other girls in the group. It was a photo of an old abandoned house in the middle of the woods, with a message that simply read, "Come to this house at midnight tonight, if you dare." I was instantly freaked out, but I didn't want to show it. I quickly snapped back a reply, telling her that it was a joke, and we're all having fun. But as minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The house of the photo looked eerily familiar, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was the same house that my friends and I had explored when we were younger. At exactly midnight, my phone started vibrating like crazy. I had received a bunch of snaps from other girls in the group, all of them showing up at the house. They were laughing and taking selfies, not realizing that they were being watched. I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine as I snapped back a reply, telling them to be careful. As the night wore on, the snaps got creepier. Emily sent a photo of a bloodstain on the floor, while another girl snapped a picture of what looked like a broken window. I tried to convince them to leave, but they were having too much fun. Finally, I got a snap from Emily that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of her surrounded by candles, wearing a long black dress. Her eyes were empty and her mouth was twisted with a grin. The caption simply read, "Join us." I was terrified, but I couldn't bring myself to ignore her. I snapped back a reply, telling her that I was coming, but to be careful. I grabbed my keys and hurriedly drove to the old house, my heart racing the entire way. When I arrived, I saw Emily and the others standing in the yard, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight. They beckoned me forward, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to them. As I stepped closer, I noticed that the house seemed to be changing before my eyes. The broken window had been fixed, and the bloodstain was gone. The overgrown lawn was trimmed, and the candles lined the walkway leading to the front door. I hesitated for a moment, but Emily took my hand and led me inside. The inside of the house was just immaculate as the outside. Every room was perfectly clean and decorated with elaborate candelabras with fresh flowers. It was almost as if someone had been living here all along. Emily guided me down a long, winding hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing eerily of the walls. At the end of the hall, she stopped and turned to face me.
"Welcome,"
she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart.
"You're finally here."
Before I could respond, she reached out and touched my cheek, her fingers cold and trembling.
"I have been waiting for you."
Her touch sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt as if I were about to lose control of my own body.
"What do you want from me?"
I managed to choke out. "What's going on?" Emily smiled sadly and shook her head.
You don't understand, Tim.
She said softly.
You never did. This was always meant to be.
And with that, she leaned in closer, her lips pressing against mine. As her tongue slipped past my lips, I felt myself to lose consciousness, falling deeper and deeper into the darkness. When I come to, I found myself lying on the cold, hard ground. My head ached and my mouth tasted foul. I struggled to sit up, wincing as pain shot through my body. As my vision cleared, I saw Emily and the others standing over me, their faces twisted into cruel smiles.
Welcome back,
Emily crooned.
We were beginning to wonder if you ever wake up.
I scattered to my feet, instinctively backing away from them.
"What do you want from me?"
I cried.
"Why are you doing this?"
Emily laughed, a cold, mocking sound. You should know better than ask questions, she said. Just accept your fate and join us. As she spoke, the others circled around me, their eyes burning with an unholy light. I tried to run, but my legs felt like jelly. I could feel their hands closing in onto me, pulling me back towards them, and I knew there was no escape. With a final, desperate scream, I surrendered to the darkness, only to awaken, gasping for breath in my own bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, and the familiar sounds of my parents' urging drifted up from downstairs. At first, I thought it all had been a horrible nightmare. But as I sat up and examined myself in the mirror, I knew the truth. My heart ached, and my hands trembled as I ran over them my body, searching any signs of harm. Everything seems to be in place. But Emily's words haunted me. They echo in my mind, refusing to be silenced. I knew that she was somewhere out there, and that she will only find me again. And when she did, I wouldn't be able to escape her grasp a second time. The only thing I could do now was to try to forget about the old house and the strange events that had taken place there. To prevent that, it was all just a bad dream. As I slipped into my usual spot behind the register, the familiar scent of fries and burgers greeted me like an old friend. It was another long, quiet night at McDonald's drive-thru, the only light coming through the faint glow of the golden arches and the stars above. The air was cool against my skin, a welcome relief from the relentless summer heat. I adjusted my headset and gave back a quick glance at the security monitor when a strange figure caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I focused, I realized it wasn't. There, in the drive-through lane, stood a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its long limbs and glowing eyes seemed to pulse with an unworldly energy, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. I hesitantly reached for the intercom, my heart racing as I wondered what I should say to this thing. Hi? You can't be here. This is a restricted area. You need to leave. I stammered, my voice quivering slightly. The creature didn't move, its eerie gaze never leaving me. I waited, my ears straining for any sound, but the only thing I could hear was the distant hum of the fryers and the cars passing by on the road outside. The minutes ticked by, and still the creature didn't budge. A strange sense of curiosity began to replace my fear. I took a deep breath and tried again. Look, I don't know who you are or what you want, but you need to leave. This isn't the place for creatures like you. I said, my words coming out more confident than I felt. Again, the creature remained silent and motionless, its glowing eyes unblinking. As the eerie minutes stretched on, the eerily silence was interrupted by the faint sound of the car horns in the distance. I glanced at the security monitor and saw the growing line of cars forming outside the drive-thru. Word of my encounter was spreading, and the people was coming to see in for themselves. I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement wash over me. Maybe, I thought, this creature wasn't so bad after all. Maybe it was just trying to bring some excitement into my boring old life. The creature seemed to sense my newfound curiosity as its glowing eyes flickered in my direction. I took a deep breath and decided to try communicating with it again. Hey, I am Emma. Can you talk to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause, and then the creature's image in the security monitor shifted, as if it were trying to respond. Images and feelings began to flash through my mind, like a distorted dream. I saw strange, alien landscapes and felt a strange of peace and wonder wash over me. I couldn't understand what it was trying to say, but I knew that it was trying to communicate with me. As the night wore on, the creature returned into the mind's eye, its presence becoming more and more confronting. I began to look forward to our late-night chats, finding solace in the knowledge that something beyond my mundane existence still existed. The news of my encounter spread like wildfire, and soon the normally empty drive-thru was teeming with people all hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious being. I found myself telling stories about the creature to anyone who would listen. My once ordinary job at McDonald's transformed into something more akin to a midnight circus act. And then, one night, it happened. The creature returned, its ethereal form filling the security monitor once more. I felt a thrill of anticipation run through me as I wanted for it to speak. The images it showed me were more vivid than ever before, and I found myself lost in the world of strange and beautiful visions. As the hours passed, I began to realize that the drive-thru, once the epitome of banality, had become a gateway to something much more profound. It was a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary intersected, where the line between reality and fantasy blurred and shifted with each passing moment. And as I sat there in my little booth, I knew that I would never be the same again. News of my encounter spread even further, drawing in people from all corners of the globe. Scientists and philosophers alike descended upon the drive-thru, each hoping to unlock the secrets of the creature and its otherworldly communications. But despite their best efforts, they could not replicate the connection I shared with it. It seemed that I was the only one who could truly understand the creature's intentions. As time went on, the creature's visits became less frequent, but the impact it had on my life remained. I left my job at McDonald's and wrote a best-selling book about my experiences, sharing the lessons I had learned from the creature with the world. My life had been transformed from the mundane to the extraordinary, all because of a chance of encounter in the drive-thru. As I reflected on those fateful nights, I knew that I would never forget the creature's words, or the profound effect it had on my life. In the end, the creature's identity remained a mystery. Its true form and intentions forever shrouded in the realm of speculation. But to me, it would always be a symbol of hope and wonder, a reminder that even in the most ordinary of places, the extraordinary can be found if one only looks closely enough. And so, I continued to wait for those rare magical nights when the creature would appear once more, its glowing eyes beckoning me back into a world of limitless possibility. I never thought that a seemingly harmless website like Reddit could be used as a tool for creepy stalkers. But that all changed when I became a victim of a stalker who had been using Reddit to hunt down unsuspecting victims like me. It all started innocently, though. I had been a regular user of Reddit for years, using it for various interests like sharing memes, discussing my favorite TV shows, and even getting advice on personal matters. Little did I know that my presence on the site would catch the eye of someone with more sinister intentions. It began with a private message from a user named Dark Ninja, who claimed to have seen some of my posts and found them interesting. I didn't think much of it and responded, thinking it was just another friendly interaction with a fellow Redditor. But as our conversations progressed, I started to feel uneasy. Dark Ninja seemed to have an unnerving obsession with me, constantly commenting on my posts and asking personal questions. At first, I tried to brush it off as harmless curiosity. But then, Dark Ninja started showing up in places I visited in real life. I would see him lurking around the corner of my street, or sitting at the table in my favorite coffee shop. I started to feel like I was being watched. Like I had a shadow following me everywhere I went. I began to suspect that Dark Ninja was not just a random user on Reddit, but someone who had intentionally seeking me out. I couldn't shake it off the feeling of being stalked, and it only intensified when I received a message from Dark Ninja on Reddit, confessing that he had been stalking me, that he was obsessed with me. I was terrified. How had this person found me? How long had he been watching me? And why was he doing this? These questions swirled in my mind as I debated whether to involve the authorities or handle it on my own. But before I could make a decision, Dark Ninja revealed that he had been using Reddit to stalk and find his victims. he shared his twisted methods with me, revealing that he would go through Reddit forums and profiles to pinpoint potential targets. He had been watching me for months, studying my posts and comments to learn more about me and how to approach me. I feel sick to my stomach. I had been so naive to have trusted a site like Reddit, thinking it was a safe place to share my thoughts and interests. But little did I know, it had become a hunting ground for this deranged stalker. Dark Ninja continued to send me messages, trying to convince me that he was just a fan who admired me. But I knew better now. I had to put an end to this before things escalated further. With shaking hands, I mustered the courage to report him to the authorities and cut off all communication with him. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. Dark Ninja was not one to give up easily. He started leaving disturbing comments on my post, threatening to harm me if I didn't respond to his messages. He even went as far as to post personal information about me on Reddit, sharing my name, address, and workplace, making it clear that he knew where I lived and worked. I was living in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if Dark Ninja was watching me. I felt like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, and there was no way out. But then, just when I thought things could get any worse, I received a message from a user named Reddit Savior. They claimed to have seen my post about being stalked by Dark Ninja and offered to help me. It was a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had consumed me. Reddit Savior explained that they were a part of a group on Reddit that actively searched and reported any suspicious or dangerous users. They had noticed Dark Ninja's actions and had been monitoring him for some time. They even had evidence of his previous stalking incidents and were determined to put an end to it. I was hesitant to trust another stranger from Reddit, but I had no other choice. I gave Reddit Savior all the information I had on Dark Ninja and prayed that they would be able to stop him. Days went by, and Dark Ninja seemed to have disappeared from Reddit and my life. I was cautiously hopeful that he had been caught or scared off by Reddit Savior. But then, a few weeks later, I received a message from Reddit Savior with news that made my blood run cold. They had discovered that Dark Ninja was a notorious stalker who had been using various social media platforms, including Reddit, to find and target his victims. And he wasn't alone. There was a group of stalkers working together on Reddit, using the anonymity and reach of the website to their advantage. My heart sank as I realized that I was not the only victim. This group of stalkers had been using Reddit to prey on innocent people, and I had unknowingly become a part of their twisted game. Thanks to Reddit Savior and the other members of the group, the authorities were able to track down and arrest the stalkers. It was a relief to know that they were finally off the streets, but the damage had already been done. The trauma and fear that had inflicted on the victims would stay with us forever. It made me realize that we can never be too careful with our online presence, and that there are dangerous individuals lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting victims.